If you're looking for a shade-tolerant and deer-resistant evergreen, I would look into the Japanese Plum Yew. The Latin name is Cephalotaxus harringtonia, native to Japan. And this tree is definitely shade-tolerant. This one is in partial shade. And I'm growing the vertical tree version. There are a few other varieties you can find out in the nursery and horticultural trade, like a low-growing, almost a creeping version that goes along the ground. And then there's kind of a narrow columnar upright version, which forms more of a vertical pillar. But I like this one that has a horizontal branching, overall kind of a domed, somewhat conical shape. It's relatively slow growing, definitely cold hardy. This has been down to some very low temperatures. The other interesting thing about this tree is that it has both male and female versions, and the female version does produce a fruit, although I don't think I would ever eat it, because one other feature you need to know about this tree is that the foliage and the branches and the roots are toxic. So if you have young kids or animals that like to chew on trees, you probably would not want to get this one. But other than that, I think it's a fantastic tree. It looks pretty cool. And it's been growing very well for me here in Middle Tennessee, which is Zone 7. So it definitely tolerates heat and humidity. And this is just one of my specimens, so let's take a look at the others and see how they're doing in different growing locations. Here's a really small one that I just recently planted, and it's a somewhat partial shady location. It's behind a larger tree, although that larger tree may be getting ready to die. It was a Thuja green giant, so this one might be the most sun-exposed specimen that I have of this tree, but it's doing just fine with plenty of sun. It gets lots of morning sun and even some pretty good afternoon sun. It has some other trees planted near it, like these magnolias, which will eventually give it lots of afternoon shade, so it still will be a partial shade location, which is probably just fine for this tree. As you can see, the small ones look a little different, but they always end up looking about the same when they get bigger. It's sort of a mounded, dome-shaped conifer. And by the way, this tree was purchased on the website wilsonbrothersgardens.com, and that seems to be the best and possibly only source for the tree type Cephalotaxus harringtonia. So definitely check that out. Okay, here's another one, and this is tucked in, as you can see, behind some other trees, so it gets a pretty good bit of shade. But it does get morning sun. This is morning right now, so it's getting some good sun. And that's just about all it needs, is just some sun during the day, some direct sunlight, I would say. I wouldn't plant it in full shade because that would be too much for it, but I'm going to show you another example of one that gets a lot of shade. Let's look at the top up here. You can see doesn't really have a main leader that shows up during the year. It kind of springs up at the start of the growing season, and then these other side branches somewhat take over. So it's pretty reliable grower. This has tolerated temperatures down to -4 Fahrenheit, which is about -20 Celsius. And so it's definitely cold tolerant, but it's also tolerant of heat and humidity, and it grows well in alkali soils. So if you have alkalinity, especially when the bedrock in your area is limestone, usually if you see a lot of limestone in your area, that means the soils tend to be more alkaline because they are limestone derived, and Japanese Plum Yew handles that very well. This one is a female, by the way, so it does get the fruits every now and then, although I don't think I see any on it right now. Taking a look at that same specimen from further back, it's a little hard to distinguish what's what. It's green on green here, but this in the middle here is the Plum Yew. Just try to give you an idea of the texture of the foliage. Now here's a Plum Yew that's growing in mostly shade. It does get dappled sunlight throughout the day because it's loblolly pine above, but you can see from the needles here, it's pretty much right under the pines, and it's got a nice dark green. Actually, the needles are larger on this one than any of the others to capture more of that sunlight. You can see it's doing very well in this spot. And here is yet another Japanese Plum Yew. This one is in mostly shade because it gets shaded from these trees during most of the morning and midday, and then in the afternoon gets a little bit of direct sun. But these tall trees in the distance here also get plenty of shade in the afternoon. But it's looking great even though it's growing in mostly shade, and actually maybe the best growing one out of all of them. So this here, I think, is where the growing season started, and I believe all of this and all of this is new growth for a year. Maybe just from here to up there, but it looks like it actually put on multiple pushes of growth this year, which I don't think I've ever seen before. And one other interesting detail about this particular specimen is that it appears to be a female, because here is one of the fruits. This is the reason it's called a plum yew. Let me see if I can get in here real good. There we go. Because it creates this fruit that looks like a plum. It's actually a modified cone, since this is a conifer. It's not a flowering tree, and it doesn't produce a true fruit. But it does produce this. Let's see if we can focus this good. Plum here. There we go. Glossy, brown. I don't think it's ripe yet. I think it has to wait till later in the season. I believe in Japan they actually might cultivate this tree just to get those plum yew fruits and eat them, but as I said before, I don't really have an intention to try to eat that, considering how toxic the rest of the plant is. I just don't know enough about it to know what I'm doing. So, but this is an amazing specimen, and you can see how well it's growing here in a situation that's mostly shade. Would give a lot of other conifers trouble, but this species loves the shady conditions. I would consider the Japanese plum yew to be the ideal replacement for our native southeastern hemlocks, which have mostly been destroyed by the hemlock woolly adelgid invasive pest from Asia. And so I think we can answer, oh, there we go. There's a less ripe fruit. I think we can answer the invasion of one Asian pest by replacing these shady plantings with an Asian species that is completely resistant to that, but this really has a major benefit of being deer resistant. This is completely exposed to deer browsing in the wintertime. I think there were 1 or 2 nibbles on the tips of a branch, but I could see that the deer immediately spit it out and didn't even chew it up. So it's super deer resistant. Really cool tree, super cool texture here. Very prehistoric look in my opinion, with these crazy long needles and the way the branching structure is very geometric almost. It's kind of hard to tell here, but it's got a pretty good branching structure. It's kind of exotic looking, and it does get a pretty good reaction whenever people see it. Oh look, there's more fruit. There we go. Hard to see. Let's get down here. Nice. 2 more of the plum fruits on the Japanese plum yew. As I said, the tree is very popular in horticulture right now. There are a couple different varieties. There's the narrow columnar version, very upright, and then there's also the prostrate, low growing to the ground, almost creeping variety, which you see everywhere. And there are a few other varieties that are slightly less popular, like Utopia and some others which form more of a low bush. But personally, I prefer the full tree size version, because that's kind of my theme here, is evergreen trees. But I highly recommend getting one, adding to your collection if you're growing evergreens and conifers in the southeast. You will not be disappointed by the look of this tree.